At the very bottom of India, where the Indian Ocean meets the Andaman Sea, sits a small, mostly forgotten island covered in dense, tropical rainforest. Its name is Great Nicobar. Population? Just over 8,000 people. For decades, it was one of the most remote and untouched places on Earth. No major port, no international airport. Just jungle, coral reefs, rare sea turtles, and a few thousand indigenous people who have lived there for thousands of years. India is about to spend $10 billion transforming it into one of the most strategically important military and commercial hubs on the planet. And Beijing is absolutely desperate to stop it. Before we get into what India is building, understand why this tiny island matters so much. The Strait of Malacca handles nearly a quarter of global trade and is especially vital for China, through which a majority of its energy imports pass. Every single day, hundreds of ships carrying oil, gas, electronics, food, and raw materials squeeze through a corridor barely 2.8 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Great Nicobar Island sits just 150 kilometers from that corridor. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a 700-kilometer stretch, are a natural aircraft carrier that India was gifted by geography. For decades, India barely used this gift. That era is now over. To understand why this project is so explosive geopolitically, you need to understand China's strategy in the Indian Ocean first. Since the early 2000s, China has been systematically building what analysts call the String of Pearls, a network of ports and naval facilities stretching from the South China Sea all the way to the Arabian Sea. Gwadar Port in Pakistan, Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka, which China now controls after Sri Lanka couldn't repay its loans, Kyaukphyu Port in Myanmar, and most alarming for India, China is attempting to build a military facility on the Coco Islands in Myanmar, located just 55 kilometers north of India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands. China's strategy has been brilliant and patient. Build civilian ports, offer cheap loans. When countries can't repay, take control. Establish military presence, slowly encircle India. India watched this for 20 years. And finally decided to play the same game, but from a far stronger geographic position. So what exactly is India building on Great Nicobar? The project includes 4 major components: an international container transshipment terminal at Galathea Bay with a capacity of 14.2 million TEU, a greenfield international airport capable of handling 4,000 passengers per hour, a 450 megavolt hybrid gas and solar power plant, and a new township. The port alone is a game changer. The port at Galathea Bay has a natural water depth of over 20 meters, capable of handling some of the largest cargo vessels in the world. This is the kind of depth that only the world's premier ports possess. Right now, India loses enormous revenue because large cargo ships cannot dock at Indian ports. They divert through Singapore, Colombo, and Port Klang in Malaysia instead. The proposed transshipment terminal is intended to reduce this dependence, position India as a regional shipping hub, and strengthen maritime surveillance and defense capabilities in the Andaman Sea. But here's what the official press releases won't tell you directly. The airport is dual use, civilian and military. The port can berth warships. The power plant supports sustained military operations. The project features a transshipment port, international airport, and military support infrastructure that effectively strengthens India's ability to project power deep into the Indo-Pacific. This is not just a port. This is a military base dressed in commercial clothing. The project will be rolled out in 3 phases between 2025 and 2047, with Phase 1 completion expected by 2028. The full vision extends to 2050, including deep-sea mining, expanded townships, and industrial hubs. Now let's talk about why Beijing is losing sleep over this. Chinese strategists have a term for their greatest vulnerability. They call it the Malacca Dilemma. The term was coined in 2003 by Chinese leader Hu Jintao, describing the strategic challenge China faces in securing access to critical energy and trade routes. The United States is viewed within Chinese strategic analysis as a potential threat to maritime energy flows through the Strait of Malacca. In a conflict, particularly over Taiwan, the U.S. could interdict oil shipments to China by disrupting these routes. China has spent decades trying to solve this problem. Pipelines from Central Asia, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor to reach the Arabian Sea through Gwadar. At one point, they even proposed funding a canal across Thailand's Kra Isthmus to bypass Malacca altogether. None of these alternatives fully solve the problem, and now, India is about to make it dramatically worse for Beijing. With nearly 80% of China's oil imports passing through the Malacca Strait, experts argue that a strengthened Indian presence could help India monitor and respond to developments in this vital maritime chokepoint and counter Beijing's expanding footprint. Think about what that means in practice. In any future conflict over Taiwan, or any confrontation between China and the United States, India would have the ability to monitor every ship, every tanker, every military vessel moving through the most critical energy corridor on the planet, and potentially the ability to interdict it. That is an existential threat to China's economy, and Beijing knows it. But here's the angle that makes this story truly extraordinary, and one that almost no Western outlet is covering. Security analysts increasingly believe that China has a clear incentive to amplify negative narratives around the project to stall or dilute its impact. Instead of creating entirely false narratives, such campaigns often magnify real concerns, making them appear larger, more urgent, or more damaging than they actually are. But here is the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask out loud. When the BJP government accuses critics of serving China's interests, and when China demonstrably benefits from this project being delayed, where does legitimate environmental concern end and strategic interference begin? Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has called the project one of the biggest scams and the gravest crime against the country's natural and tribal heritage. The ruling BJP has responded by alleging that opposition to the project is motivated by the fact that it directly threatens China's strategic interests. India's most ambitious infrastructure project has become a geopolitical battleground. And the fight isn't just happening in courts and parliament. It's happening in the information space too. So where does this leave us? 3 scenarios for what happens next. Scenario 1. Full speed ahead. Phase 1 completes by 2028 as planned. The port opens, the airport becomes operational, India establishes a permanent military and commercial presence at the mouth of the Malacca Strait. The Malacca dilemma becomes China's permanent strategic headache. India emerges as the dominant power in the eastern Indian Ocean, precisely as it intended. Scenario 2. Death by delay. Legal challenges in the Calcutta High Court drag on. Environmental objections multiply. International scrutiny over tribal rights intensifies. The project stalls, not through direct opposition, but through the slow, grinding process of democratic contestation. Construction timelines slip by years. China's window of strategic comfort extends. The Malacca Strait remains outside Indian control. Scenario 3. A compromise that satisfies nobody. The port gets built, but at reduced scale. The military components are downgraded publicly to maintain environmental optics. The airport opens, but with limited capacity. India gets a presence at Malacca, but a far weaker one than originally envisioned. China is inconvenienced but not threatened. Most analysts believe Scenario 1 is most likely. The project has too much strategic momentum and political backing to be stopped. But Scenario 2 is closer than the government admits. Here is what the Great Nicobar project really tells us about the world we're entering. Geography is back. After decades of believing that trade, technology, and interconnection had made physical location irrelevant, the world is rediscovering that where you sit on the map still determines how much power you hold. India has always sat in one of the most geographically blessed positions in the world, surrounded by the Indian Ocean, positioned between the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Malacca, at the center of the world's fastest-growing economic region. For most of its modern history, it squandered that position. Great Nicobar is India's declaration that those days are over. The dragon is not merely uncomfortable with what is being built at the southern tip of India's island chain. It is, in every strategic sense of the word, desperate to stop it. Whether India lets it is the question that will shape the Indo-Pacific for the next 50 years. Subscribe to the Power Map, because this is exactly the kind of story that defines the century, and most people have never even heard of it.